All right, guys, and welcome back. Real quick, I wanted to talk to you guys about breather systems and when you need one and what you might need. Typically, anything larger than a 1776 and sometimes even a 1776 will need a breather system of some sort with limitations. Sometimes you can get away with just on a smaller engine, you can get away with venting your valve covers. Usually on the steel ones, I just weld a little piece of steel on it, a little tube on there, put clamps on here, run the lines up, and sometimes I'll just put air, like a little filters, air filters back here to connect the two sides. Sometimes that takes care of it, but more often than not, you're going to need this type of system here. So like on my 1904, I have a box. It's just like this box right here, okay, but it's located behind, because I didn't want to see it, it's located behind the fan shroud, okay, and being behind the fan shroud, it's incognito, you don't really see it at all, but you do need a couple of other things in addition to that. Even with this one, a lot of guys will run these and they won't put the road draft tube on. And what it says right in the instructions is, it says right here, this one in the back, I'm waiting for an elbow for this one. So I put an elbow in here, I run this down, and then through your road draft tube hole, right down below, you run this down, and you have to install a road draft tube as well. If you don't do it, more than likely you're going to blow oil. Now if you're driving just in town, you may not blow oil, okay, but it's usually when you're on the freeway for a long period, decent period of time, it starts to build up pressure inside your engine and starts to blow oil out of everywhere. Now when somebody tells me my engine's leaking from everywhere, that's usually the breather system that's not there, or you're running too many RPMs on the freeway. I've even seen 1600s that run too many RPMs on the freeway, and you may get away with the breather system, but probably you just need to get some different gears in your transmission. They have this style here, the E brand, at Carcraft. They don't have them in stock usually, so you got to call in and make sure you order it in advance if you're going to go pick one up. They have the best price, of course. CB Performance has one that's a little bit more, but it's nice too. It's really nice. They have good, nice products there. But they do have this style too, and these are pretty nice for your custom engine because it's really nice and compact, and all your hoses, you can tuck them like I did here behind the intake manifold, down around behind the shroud, over the other side. And if you have aluminum valve covers, you just get these little bungs, you put in your aluminum valve cover and put them in that way. Be careful when you drill these that you're not too close to where the spring is located. You'll notice the spring on your valve spring, you don't want it to hit. So I'm hoping that mine aren't going to hit. They're pretty close to them, so make sure you watch for that. All right, when you put those in. So you do need one going to each valve cover, and you also need the road draft tube. So if you're going to run this particular one, you need those two lines, the road draft tube, and at least one going to one carburetor. They do have one in this one for both. So this one and the CB Performance one has one for each carburetor. So it can go to one carburetor to the other carburetor, and make sure you have at least one going to one of the carburetors if you're going to have this one of these breather systems. And depending on the size, you might need to. So if you might run into like a really big engine, the bigger the engine, the more movement of air. The things that cause the increased crankcase pressure is the counterweighted crankshaft. And some of you guys, even 1600s or the 69s with a counterweighted crank, sometimes you'll build up crankcase pressure. It's not a real big deal. It can be completely hidden. Like I said, you can put it behind the fan shroud, even little box style ones, and just have one hose running from here. I'll show you what style. On your stock road draft tube style one, you have this one that you put a T on here, you run one to the air cleaner and one to the breather box. So you'll have a few different lines on there. It'll be basically, the additional line will be one that goes from here around to the back of the engine. That's very incognito. So, I mean, I have them on my other engines, and you don't even really notice they're there because everything I have is behind the fan shroud. So, because I wanted them hidden. On this one here is on a Baja style, and we wanted it open and notorious. We don't really care. This is how this engine is set up. If you notice, it does not have a tin behind the pulley, any of that, because this is all just completely exposed. So it's a different situation. It all depends on the car. But if you're putting on one of the road draft tubes, okay, or if you're putting on a breather system, make sure they have this that looks like that, okay? They have these that look like that. They don't have a road draft tube. You need to have the one that has the road draft tube in addition. If you don't have the road draft tube, there's not going to be enough ventilation for most of your engines, all right? So if you're going to do a few different options, again, if you're going to do this one and you have the road draft tube and you say, hey, I don't need a breather box, but I'm going to vent the 2 valve covers and I'm going to put 2 little air filter vents in the back, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that'll do it. But you still need this road draft tube, okay? You got to have it and have one of these. I've seen guys before, and including myself, back when I was a teenager, I had one of those aluminum style with the push-in cap, all right? I had a twist cap on mine, but it was, I had a vented cap even. Okay, I had a vented cap, and I had no road draft tube, but I had one of these, okay? One hooked up to that one outlet. It did not work, even with a breather box on it. I had a breather box with the 2 valve covers, and I did not have a road draft tube, and my engine always blew oil. A couple other guys I've seen, I was behind a guy, he had that same setup. He had that aluminum tube that comes out with a little, one of these guys stuck in the side of it. You know what I'm talking about, the aluminum tube with the little thing. And his, even with that, and I think all he had was a 1776 in a bus with, you know, running some RPMs in the freeway. It wasn't really way over RPM'd either because he had tall tires. So with that, he was still blowing oil. And I was getting speckles on my windshield. We pulled over and looked, and he did not have the road draft tube. So if you're going to put a breather system on, be sure to run the road draft tube. Now, I run them without the cap, okay, because there's a little more ventilation that way. And what this does is when you're going down the road, the air goes across this tube, all right, and creates a suction. And when the air goes across that tube, it creates a suction, and it helps to breathe, make the engine breathe. This was the old positive crankcase ventilation system of the era, okay. 57 Chevys had a road draft tube. You know, cars in the 60s had road draft tubes. It wasn't until the late 60s and they started putting positive crankcase ventilation PCV systems in with the little, you know, vacuum thing that goes to your manifold. That was on the regular cars, and the Volkswagens, I don't think they have enough vacuum, or they were worried it would run hot with those, so they never put them on them. But this was the system they kept all the way till 1979, I believe, when they stopped making them in the U.S. So you got to find one with a road draft tube. If you find, like I said, there's a 40 horse ones that don't have any, that have nothing. I would highly recommend putting that on. And if you're having an issue and you change all your seals on your engine, you've resealed it, and your valve covers are leaking and it's leaking behind here, this is your biggest indicator. If it's leaking behind here, a lot of times that's because you're building crankcase pressure. Now, if you're building crankcase pressure and for some reason you have a full breather system on it, or you think you're blowing, then you need to really take a look at your engine RPMs in the freeway. These engines do not like to run really high RPMs in the freeway. If you're up near 4,000 RPMs on the freeway, this thing's going to blow oil. It's going to blow oil out of places you never thought it could, and even if you have the breather system. So that's when you need to really take a look at your tire sizes, okay? And maybe you got too small tires, or maybe you've got Your gear ratios in your car need to be updated. You know, put in the 388 gear set in there in your Beetle, or your 388 82 in your bus, okay, or your 388 77, which is the one I like if you're going that direction. Or you can do the 344 89 fourth in the bus with the gear reduction boxes. If you don't have gear reduction boxes, you stick to the Beetle gears. Okay, that's what you want in there. I usually like a 412 in a bus with no gear reduction boxes. Just a straight 412 works great as long as your tires aren't really low profile. If it's a really low profile, you're going to need that taller fourth gear. There's a whole crap load of stuff to know about gear ratios. You can spend a whole day researching it easily. But you need it done right. Okay. So anyway, that's about breather systems for you guys. They have these. They have the little box style. They have really big box styles for your racer guys. Those guys usually don't need coaching. Usually they know what they need. So I'm not going to go into all those, but make sure that you got the road draft tube on it. So anyway, I'll talk to you in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.